Oh, yeah, that's like.
All right, guys. Hello and welcome to the Finance Committee meeting for Wednesday, October the 12th. The first item on the agenda is the approval of the September 28th, 2016 minutes.
Move to approve.
I was just going to say, and they're both on the same document, so if anyone was wondering where the second one was.
I wasn't here for the first of those.
All right, so then don't make a motion.
Move to approval.
I'll take Chuck. Chuck's motion, do I have a second? Second. Second by Mark. All those in favor? Unanimous. All right, the second article on the agenda was Article 23, the Army Renovation Committee's proposal for the air conditioning. As you guys remember, last time we talked to Selectman Murray about this, and he had given an indication they were leaning toward passing over. Well, I got formal indication from them that they are going to be passing over this article. Excellent. So we are going to go right past that one.
Question?
Yes.
Just, I presume this is going to come up again at some point.
I would assume so.
So, are they gonna get in the queue so that we don't go around and around as we did the last time?
I indicated to Brian, and Brian has given us the indication that he is going to pass that along over to the youth center, the youth commission, excuse me, because he felt that they were better served as being proponents of that article.
Without any question, but so long as we don't,
Yep.
they have to get in the queue like everyone else.
Absolutely. So they are going to be the ones that are going to be pursuing that
Thank you.
going forward, and not the building committee.
Although they'll be getting the notification along with all the other department heads, letting them know that May is for emergency and special only, and that any other items that they have in the plan should be brought forward and put on the long-range plan.
I don't have to tell you, but as we go through these things, when that is actually done, it makes it so much easier.
We also will be asking them to do what we're asking everybody to do, is put together the proposal, so that 2 to 3 weeks minimum, but hopefully a month before the town meeting, we can post it on the website and make it available to everybody, so that we can actually look at all the information.
No question, with certainly a significantly more detailed look than we got this time, you know, area that it's covering, that type of stuff, so. And once again, they've been made aware of that, and going forward, like I said, that will be a youth commission endeavor, not a building committee endeavor. All right, the next article we had talked about at our last meeting, we decided to table it to this meeting, and that's Article 37, and that is dealing with taxpayer relief. We purposely passed over last time because we were getting some leanings that our free cash number was going to be a little bit different than what we thought it was. In fact, it is the case, and I don't want to steal too much of Zach's thunder, so I'm going to stay away from details, but free cash was certified yesterday, and that was really the reason that we passed it over last time and why we wanted to discuss it tonight. So with that being said, Zach.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So as the chairman had indicated, we had met last Friday to have our financial team meeting, which is the gentleman in front of you today. Paul Abendanza was also there, as well as Chairman Chris Moran. And the premises of our discussion really revolved around this final article here. As we know, the majority of all other articles have been voted. We're in agreement. We've talked on ends about a lot of the different goals which we're able to meet. So this came to the final piece. And as the dust clear and we're in a better position, we tried to get a targeted approach on what level we should be giving back to the tax rate. Now, also keep in mind that during this discussion, we realized that there's also available levy outside of what we're actually having appropriated for raise and appropriate. So that amount is expected to be around $832,000. So we obviously took careful consideration into what we would be sponsoring as a group effort for taxpayer relief. And the number we came up with was $2.4 million, which collectively with the available levy would create an excess levy capacity figure of $3.2 million. Now, part of our discussion, sure, go ahead.
Everyone has a hard copy of this. I know we're having some issues with some of the tablets, so if you do not have a hard copy, it is up on the drive for you. So anything that Zach talks about is available, and if you can't pull it up on the drive and you need a hard copy, we do have some more available. Sorry, Zach, I just want to make sure they saw what you're looking at.
Yep, no problem. And that could be seen to Chris's point at the bottom of the chart. And I put a nice little arrow in there to try to avoid any confusion to how the mechanics of it really plays out. So again, back to our meeting, when we were discussing what a responsible figure would be, we tried really to have a targeted approach of what the likelihood of a levy tax increase would be. And what we were trying to decide on was what level would get us under a 2% increase on a residential factor. Now, part of that discussion, we made very clear that the assessed values are not in, which absolutely can alter what the figures are. By having an increase in commercial, could have an adverse decrease in residential or vice versa. So based on the available information we had, we took more or less a neutral model of what last year was expected, and we applied the figures, and that's where 2.4 million came into play. Now, we also tried looking at what our free cash levels would be outside of that. Keep in mind, we have 1.1 million moving forward at the annual town meeting for, at the special town meeting for the ladder truck. So if we follow this plan, we would be going into the annual town meeting with $2.8 million in free cash. So also part of our discussion in that financial team meeting was what should we do or expected to do, what should we be planning for this remaining balance for the annual town meeting. And I think the consensus was clear that first and foremost, we should be looking to clear whatever snow and ice deficit that the town may incur this year, which we more than likely will. And at that point, we also know that we have a lot of capital projects coming down the line, so we could make decisions whether we want to continue to fund the stabilization at that point, or like we did this past year, if everyone recalls, any articles that did appear, whether supplementing the operational budget or otherwise, we first decided to fund with free cash, which put us ultimately in this very desirable position right now with levy capacity, as we had nothing raised at that time. So it is something that we would be recommending that we continue to do. And also, I'd like to give a reminder, I think it's important to note that we did, for lack of a better term, recycle over $1 million in free cash from last year's balance into this year, which again is feeding this really good position. And speaking personally, I don't think there's anything wrong with maybe doing that again, and I think the group agrees with me.
Thank you, Zach.
So
And before,
that's where we're at now.
and before we open it up for questions, I just want a couple of points that people have risen to me about the level of free cash and at $2.8 million. Obviously, it's a significant amount of money, but I just want to remind everyone that last year, I believe, was $2.3 million. wasn't
Correct.
it?
That's
So
correct.
this is not, we have done this in the past. We've carried large amounts of free cash forward, knowing the capital projects are coming forward. And we've listed them, ad nauseum about all the things that we need to do, whether it's Godfrey Brook, whether it's property acquisition, whether it's the payoff of some bonds that we are now able to save significant funds on. So we have certainly things on our horizon that we can use that money for. And if we don't see a need to do something with it now, we just carry it forward. And it's not an abnormality, as we did it last year with $2.3 million. The other question that people came to me is that it was obviously a large change between the $5 million and the $6.3 million. I cannot stress enough how many times Zach sat in front of us and said to us, this number isn't in stone, this number isn't in stone. So obviously, we use the $5 million as a guidance, okay? The number is significantly different at 6.3 because of money that has dropped to the bottom, whether it was circuit breaker, whether it was the settling up of funds, whether it was increased revenue. It doesn't really matter what it is, but that's what the number is now. And that's the number that we have to deal with. And once again, it's not a bad position to be in, okay? And I can't stress that enough to people. We could be at negative $6 million, and then we have something to worry about, okay? We have uses for this project. We have very good uses for this cash, okay? And going forward, we're gonna have a lot of people, the financial team sat down. Everybody in that room was in 100% agreement as sitting here in front of them, and I'm looking at the other people that were in the room, and every one of them were in agreement with this strategy. And we thought the increase from $2 million to 2.4, when we found, we didn't find, excuse me, there was a difference. Sorry, I saw Zach leer at me. There was an increase in 1.3 in free cash, and we went up $400,000 in taxpayer relief from the $2 million that we thought before. And we thought that was extremely reasonable. So with that being said, does anybody else before I open it up?
Just one other point, Mr. Chairman, if I might. The other thing that Zach brought up about being able to for that accounting change to come in November. They allow for the town meeting vote and that new process to come in. I don't know if everybody's familiar with that.
No, and Zach, actually, that is a very good point, and it's very quick, so I know you guys are eager to talk, but Zach, if you can talk about the change that you guys learned about the stabilization.
Yeah, sure. So the recent Modernization Act went through, which had significant changes in all sorts of facets, but one of the more important ones is stabilization in and out. So classically, right now and for forever, it had been a 2/3 vote in, 2/3 vote out. Now, right after November 7th, when this act is in full swing, it will now require a much simple majority vote to go in, which leaves more responsibility into the hands of constituents and whatnot.
No
So,
question. It makes it a
yeah.
lot easier to get the money in and the same level of
Still-
2/3 to get it out.
2/3 out still, yes.
So it's
correct.
easier to save,
Still
harder to
2/3
get.
out,
Same,
correct,
yep.
yes.
I just have a couple of questions or issues, and it's tied to Article 36, what we recommend we put into the stabilization account. In the past, when we've set aside money to the taxpayer, that number always goes up, because some things don't happen, other things happen, and we end up with a much larger levy capacity. That's starting to worry me, and I'm sure a lot of other people, because if we can't sustain this 2.4 or 2.8 or 2.9 or whatever it is, when the time comes, the taxpayer is going to get hit with significant increases. So my recommendation is that we not only maintain the 2.4 as going back to the taxpayer, but we increase the amount of money we put into stabilization this time by $1 million. So we end up with $1.8 million in free cash. We take a lot of the issues off the table, and we put it into the short-term stabilization account, because that's where the capital is coming from in the future. We have it now, going into the spring with 1.8, a significant amount of money. We'll be able to cover anything we need to cover, including snow and ice back then, because what's the worst case? We've seen $1 million. I'm just trying to hold that 2.4 back to the tax rate at 2.4. And if we take stuff off the table, we may be able to do that in a better way.
Yeah, I just have a couple of comments, and then I'll get to Mark's point as well.
My mic.
Just by way of background, we're using 2.4 million of free cash, correct?
Correct.
We're funding all our articles as well as our capital, okay? We are putting
From the levy.
how much into stabilization? 500,000?
Correct.
Okay, 500 into stabilization. Our excess levy capacity last year was 2.8, so now it's 3.2. So we increased our levy capacity by 400,000, which is actually is amazing to me. Because last year, at the 2.8, at this time, I said, we'll never sustain that 2.8.
That's a concern.
You know, and that was a concern. You know, it's just a very good and healthy financial picture. It's hard to, when you look at this, you're just like, oh my God, and it really is terrific. I'm a big believer in stabilization, I always have been. And I like to see money set aside. I'm conservative by nature, it's nice to have that little kitty. So to Mark's point, yeah, I mean, I could see that. But, you know, let me just, I can see that. The other thing, though, I'd like to see if we can get some handle on free cash, because we do this every year. And I know there are items, Zach, that we don't budget, that on the revenue side of the house, that create some of this free cash. But is there any way that we can get a better sense for this? Because this is a tough thing, to have 6.3 million of free cash. We go through the budgetary process, and we're actually working hard with these department heads to reduce budgets, or at least maintain budgets. And then we have this free cash a year later, and we say, okay, well, let's pay off this, let's pay off that. So I guess 2 points. I understand the point about being conservative, and the other one is, can we get a handle on it? I mean, we gotta be able to get a better sense for free cash somewhere.
Well, we did some of that last year, Phil, if I may, Mr. Chairman.
Sure, that's right.
So, for example, where we thought there were systemic or system-related funding that might have been in excess, We looked at things like health account, health benefits account, and we reduced that. Now, there's a fear associated with that, right? There's a risk associated with that healthcare costs are a threat, and a very real possibility that some year we're gonna come in at double digit. So we talked, as a matter of fact, the team, when the financial team talked about that sustainability component, that was actually a big part of our discussion. Could we come back, could we say, based on these numbers, that the numbers are sustainable, that that they're on target, right, and these are the right things to do. But this is a result of a lot of the work you were talking about in your subcommittee. But I guess the shorter answer to the question is, can we give you a review of all departments, how much turnback there was, whether there was something systemically that we may be able to modify, reduce, alter in the coming budget cycle? The answer is yes, and we owe that to everybody, right?
Yeah, and Zach, you've done that, correct?
Yeah, if I may, if I can continue on that. So, to Bill's point, one of the, if you really look at our free cash, one of the things that I had mentioned was we carried $1 million. So we're really talking around $5 million. So of that $5 million, around $2.5 million was budgetary turnbacks or unencumbered, unexpended. So there's a lot of components that go into that as well. So the biggest component of that was the health insurance of around 1.5 million, which is probably the most unpredictable budget you possibly can have. The turnover at the school is very heavy, and to predict a family plan versus a single plan, which is significant difference, is really difficult to do. However, we did realize that the trend had been going up. So instead of a classic over 10% increase, which we typically do in the benefit department, we actually had a decrease. So I've had this conversation with Chris, I've had it with many people, including our financial team meeting, but so what we really did this year coming in is kind of put the squeeze on what free cash may look like, which does make me a little bit nervous. So on the other token, the reason why excess levy, or available levy here, I should say, is so much higher too, because to your point also of local receipts, we did increase them to a more realistic level, if that's what you want to call it. However, even looking at those, I mean, they're made up of so many different areas of permits and license and stuff like that. It makes it very difficult to predict. So we had 2 years in a row of really, really good local receipts. Now, does that mean that moving forward we will? Not necessarily. So what we try to do is look at like a 4-year average, and that's why those numbers come in, unless we really know otherwise that maybe there's some real big building going on in town that might drive up permits. So we did increase our local receipts, which then allows your levy to increase, and we also put the squeeze on the other end. So we're kind of doing this going into the next budget cycle.
Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Aldo, yeah.
Just a question for Mark. Mark, when you said another million, were you saying the 500 plus another million?
Yep.
You're talking 1.5.
Yep.
I just missed out.
Mr. Chairman.
Yep.
I think Zach is right on, and when we go through the budget cycle for FY18, instead of using flat numbers for some of these things, we have to increase them and plan on an increase and see where the numbers fall at that point in time. So maybe that's the only way we may be able to control the amount of free cash. I don't want to, obviously, we all don't want to eliminate it. We want to keep it to a reasonable number instead of 6. You know, the 2 million should be the right number.
No question, and it's a very fine line, and where you're budgeting, because, I mean, you can get burned, and that's where we don't want to be. So we certainly are on the right side of it, and when Zach had mentioned about all the details that go into it, about certain things that he cannot forecast any higher, I mean, there are requirements that you're not allowed to forecast any higher. Between that, health insurance, the $1 million that we're carrying forward, when it all washes out, I don't even know if you said it, but we talked about it, about $2.5 million is really the real free cash number. Is that about?
Yeah, if we're looking at it the way we're generically talking,
Exactly.
yes. But there's just,
Which, of course, that still is a lot of money. I mean, there's no question about that, at $2.5
That's where
million.
it should be.
just another.
That's about where it should be, and that's why I don't think that this number is that far off, and of course, it's a big number, but with all the elements that get get put into this
Yeah.
equation, I don't think this number is, when it's all washed out with all the other details, that
Mr. Chairman,
that this
another-
number is that high.
Exactly.
It's $2.5 million on a $100 million budget. I mean, it's not a significant percentage.
And we talked
It's
about
a really
this.
good percentage.
And
2%.
There's no
All right.
question. And when I said that, when you get a, a 97 or a 98 on a science test, I mean, you did pretty good.
Right.
So, Alberto.
We have a motion on the floor,
No.
then I'll make one to, favorable to putting an extra million into.
We're not there.
We're not there.
Yeah.
We're not there.
That's
We're
the
on
next-
We're on the other article.
We're on the other
Article
one.
36.
We're on the 2.4
Now,
million.
the only thing is that
Then let's go forward. I mean, we're just.
well, it would,
On the 2.4?
Mr. Chairman?
Yeah, so am I. I'm
Well, you
agreed.
gotta take it,
If I
Yeah.
could,
take it.
I just want to refresh everybody, and for people that weren't there, on the discussion that we had as a finance team. Really, the discussion that we're hoping we could have here is how we could look at this free cash in the spring and decide whether we're gonna go pay down debt or add to stabilization. I'd ask if the committee is so inclined to consider that option as well. Because I don't think there's a penalty for looking at it in the spring and then deciding which of the slips that Chris is holding in a drawer that may come payable that we wanna do versus stabilization. It's just,
and that's what we had talked about in the team, and obviously, and to
Exactly.
be honest with you, that's my feeling, is that we don't lose any flexibility by not
Right.
moving it into stabilization. In fact, it allows us the ability, especially, in this, with the regular town meeting, that if we wanna put it in there, we can go ahead and do that, okay? But in the meantime, we can look at the projects that are on the table. In our funding source, we know is free cash is right there. And I am a huge proponent, and I will never stop fighting for the fact that we will pay snow and ice with free cash at that town meeting, because that makes a huge difference. And that's another thing that's reflected
yes.
in the free cash number. And that's, once again, as Zach said, so many things
Yeah.
encompass how free cash is gonna turn out. And us, by paying off free, snow and ice with free cash at the town meeting, that was reflected in free cash. So.
what I'm
it's-
asking,
Yeah.
what I heard the financial team, if this subcommittee could, I'm sorry, this committee could defer any action on the use of the available free cash to going into the Springtown meeting, we can relook at our debt and relook at how much our stabilization is, because our unallocated funds in total are about $32 million. That's partly made up by stabilization and other accounts. So there's valid discussion both ways, but I don't think that it's time sensitive that we pressure ourselves into a discussion tonight. I guess that.
And that's how I felt too, especially because of the fact that we went with the Woodland payment and didn't have to make a stabilization withdrawal.
Absolutely.
That was another thing that weighed on my mind too, is the fact that it's not like we're trying to backfill a withdrawal that we made
Right.
for Woodland.
That's the
It never
point of this
happened. So,
Mr. Chairman, I tend to take the other approach, and this committee has sat here for years and have talked about the advantages of putting money in stabilization as opposed to leaving it in free cash. Advantage one, we get interest on the money. Advantage two, town meeting has never, ever turned us down when we asked to remove money out of stabilization account for a good reason, regardless of what it is. Item three, it looks better to Moody's when we have more money in stabilization. We've talked about that as well. We get better interest rates when we borrow money. So to put more money in now, and if we need it in the spring, we take it back out and use it. I mean, I don't think there's a problem. We gain 8 months' worth of interest. We gain recognition by Moody's.
well, cash
And
equivalents, it's the same difference. They still look at our cash equivalents would be our free cash, and that would reflect just the same as our stabilization.
but you don't get interest on free cash.
Well, and I'm not arguing with your first
Interest is
point. Your first point was
significantly
valid. The
now.
second one, I'm just saying, the Moody's thing that's a wash.
Well,
We're not gonna
that's
get
fine.
any interest now.
That's
You're
fine.
gonna look at your debt.
That would be my reasoning at this point in time.
It's gonna.
Yeah,
Do I?
so, I'm sorry, I didn't. need
I'm
to-
done.
Okay.
Thank you.
So the motion on the floor, your motion,
Favorable 2.4.
2.4 on the motion? I'll
yeah,
second that.
that's coming from free
I'll
cash.
second that.
And that's
In
coming
terms
from
of the
and that's-
excess levy
and that's
capacity,
coming-
that's
coming from
remaining
free
the same. I
cash.
just want to be clear that I understand.
Yes, you're correct.
All right, I have a motion and a second on the floor for a favorable recommendation for the $2.4 million being put toward the tax rate. Is there any other discussion? All those in favor? Unanimous.
We're still co-sponsoring that.
Yes. Well, we agreed on the number, so.
Yeah.
Unless you change your number at your next meeting.
No, I think we're good.
Hold
Oh,
on.
yeah.
No, I look forward to going forward together.
No, that sounds good. And that was another good thing, as I talked about, that in the future, we're gonna try to work more as a team with the selectmen
That's the right answer.
and
So
Definitely.
Zach, you have 2 years in a row with 5 million in free cash, so.
A tough job.
Take him out, you should.
Not enough.
When he gets 10 years under his belt, the same numbers, we're gonna do employee of the month. program.
We have the
I know.
that means he buys lunch for everyone.
Hard marker, Bill.
All right, great. All right, so the second article that we need to talk about, which obviously goes hand in hand with the spreadsheet,
Correct that.
is our
Correct that, Diane.
contribution to stabilization. We had currently allocated 500,000. That's what you see here on all the paperwork here. That's what we had budgeted at the beginning of the year. Obviously, there's been talk just as a few minutes ago of changing that number. So at that point, the conversation has already started, so I'd like to continue the conversation about that
The proposal,
contribution.
500
500.
right now.
No,
But-
So,
No, that's what's in the budget.
yeah.
But talking to someone a few minutes ago, I think they might want to change that number. So, Mark.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Chairman, if I might, the 500,000 was in the budget.
Yep.
That's no addition to stabilization based on free cash. That's what we had budgeted, and that was the 500K that goes into the long-term stabilization account, the debt account, that offsets some of the payments that we have to make to Woodland, as we agreed to 3 years ago. What I'm recommending is we add another $1 million to that and put it into the short-term capital account, which is what we use to pay for capital equipment when it comes forward, as opposed to free cash. If we need the money, that's where it is. So my recommendation or my motion is to increase the stabilization amount to 1.5 million.
Now, you're gonna designate which
which
At a
account and which funding?
account.
No, Zach,
I
yeah,
think
we
his
can do that
motion
with
is
Zach,
clear.
that's
It's
not a
half
problem.
million into the
It's $500,000 into long-term and
stabilization,
a
$1
million
million into the capital.
into the capital.
That's not what Mark said.
That's what I said.
That's
No, that's
the
what I
motion I
said.
understand,
That wasn't the motion.
and
That
I'll
was-
second that one.
I'm sorry.
To add anything to long-term, is the.
No, the
No, no, no,
long-term
no,
is
time.
stabilization, that gets half a million.
Yeah, but
Excuse
then
me.
it
I think
confuses
that's
them.
great.
Excuse me,
Yeah.
can I just reiterate? 500,000 was in our budget to go into the long-term stabilization account, okay? That was there.
Yeah.
And what I would like to do, or what my motion is to increase that to by $1 million out of free cash and put that $1 million into the other stabilization account that we have.
Mr. Chairman?
Capital
Point of
account.
order. Point of order.
It's capital stabilization account.
Point
That's
of
the
order.
motion.
Jerry.
Question, okay.
I think we should go ahead and vote on the 500,000 as originally proposed, and then have another motion to take $1 million out of free cash.
No, can't do
No,
that.
I don't think.
One
we can do
article.
that.
Actually, Jerry, with all due respect, I think your point of order is out of order. You can, this is an article.
Right,
Okay.
it's an article.
You
That's
gotta
fine.
vote on the article.
Yeah.
But I'm confused, after your discussion, where the money's coming from. Mark says 500's coming from
500,000
here.
was already budgeted. The
Already budgeted.
extra million that he's talking about, I don't want to take words out of your mouth, would be from the current free cash.
Correct.
Okay, so that's another source, different source of funds.
That is a different source of funding.
Correct.
That would be for that million. The 500,000 was
Five
budgeted.
hundred was always planned in the budget,
We put it in the budget.
regardless
I
of
don't-
free cash.
I don't-
The extra million would go into the
I
capital
don't
account.
care.
But it's important.
Short-term
Yeah.
capital,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah,
So
whatever,
everyone- so
you know,
everyone-
we're calling short-term, long-term.
Exactly.
I mean, we should,
Stabilization to
we
me
should
is
come up with a
debt.
You need
name
to
that
come up with a
everybody
better name.
agrees
If you
on.
say stabilization is debt,
All right.
and the other is capital.
Because it confuses a
clear.
conversation that really shouldn't be confused.
Bill wanted to look at it in the spring, right?
I just had a question.
You still can.
Could somebody tell me what the current balance is of your short-term capital account?
2-point-something million.
Yeah, 2.8.
Yeah, I just,
See
It's
that?
high twos.
I made it up.
It's-
I just know the numbers, that's all, Bob. It's 2.8, 2.7.
Right around 3, yeah.
Yeah, I thought it was in the high twos, so 3.
It should be, because we had, if I may, we had
Well, I'm
planned
gonna
on
open it for
taking.
discussion because we had a motion and a second,
And,
so.
you know, I still have
We
the
had
floor.
planned on taking $1,000,001 out of it this year.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And Mr. DeVito does. Yeah.
My question was, your main motive for doing that is purely to collect interest.
Collect interest and take the $1 million off the table.
But again, that, as someone mentioned, I think Selectman Buckley is, it's not time sensitive, it can be done at a later date.
Of course it
With
can.
the exception of the interest.
But the other reasoning behind it is that it helps to prevent that 2.4 million from floating, that levy capacity from floating up at the end of the day. Because it'll sit on the table and it'll go back to the levy in the spring.
Mr. Chairman, Mr.
What if
Chairman,
we revisit it?
Mr. Chairman,
It'll be revisited,
Yeah, you have
as it
to.
usually has been. Every time we put money to the levy, I mean, to the taxpayer relief, we say 2 million, it ends up being 2.8, 2.7. How does it get there?
I don't know, how's it do that? You're a chairman.
Well, if articles don't pass, no, when you're,
I know how that.
once again, that is another.
And you were a selectman last year. How'd it get there?
That, once again, is a very intricate formula on how that happens. A couple things, if articles don't pass, that number's gonna change as well. We don't know. That number even got affected by the fact that 2 people removed articles from
Correct.
the
Correct.
town meeting,
And-
so.
And we have a very, very good handle on this figure right here. So unless articles.
dramatic changes.
Unless something does not go as expected.
That number is not going to shift.
New growth is going to be around where we
Yeah.
have projected, so I don't think that there's a tremendous amount of likelihood that that's gonna change dramatically.
And I think that we have a lot better, our minds are wrapped around this a lot better than it was 4 or 5 months ago, obviously. We've seen what's happened. And I agree that we are finally at the point that we have a solid, grasp of what the numbers are gonna be. So to me, I don't think these numbers are gonna shift dramatically either, so.
So just to clarify, Mr. Chairman.
Yep.
It's financial teams urging that we look back on it in the spring. And again,
And that is my recommendation as well, so, but obviously I need to hear from
Yes.
everybody. so.
First of all, I don't think it matters,
Yeah.
because if we needed it in the spring, as Mark said, we can go get it.
Yeah.
But the idea that the money won't shift, of course it will. You're gonna close out articles, leftover monies. This could be $100,000-$200,000. And again, less than, that's what, 1%, 1.5%? So the 2.4.
Well, not not 110 million,
Well, 1 out of 100 sure comes close.
Yeah,
Yeah,
no,
so-
it's just 200,000.
yeah, it's like.
It's not
0.2,
2 million.
0.2.
2 million would be 2%.
So what's
No,
the
but
balances
total
on
we
this
put in.
account?
So
Yeah, no.
You're gonna end up with 0.1 float, no matter what you,
No.
it's immaterial.
I
But
agree.
whether you put it in or not, putting it in feels better, not putting it in, either way, if you needed it.
Well, I came from the different aspect is the fact that people came up to me and they're like, are we seriously gonna, and once again, I really feel we should throw in a stabilization on a regular basis, but the fact that we didn't even withdraw for Woodland, people said to me, you're gonna throw more into the savings account, we didn't even withdraw from the savings account, we built a $61 million school, and once again, I believe we should do it, but let's look at it at the regular meeting, and if we wanna do it then, we do it then. And once again,
My colleague says there's a school coming.
that $1
Been
million.
through- We've been through that.
Who said that?
For me,
I don't think either avenue is horrible, it's just you have to have an opinion on it, and that's my opinion.
Yeah, I'm having a rough time seeing a whole lot of difference between,
I am too.
whether we leave it in free cash or whether we leave it in stabilization designated for short-term capital. I don't,
you're a stabilization guy.
I am, give me long-term, I'd rather put it in the long-term.
Oh, you don't need it there, though.
That's where I'd rather put it. But,
All right, well, at
Good
this point,
position to be in.
I have a motion and a second to increase the stabilization contribution by $1 million funded from free cash into the short-term capital, the ladder truck fund, whatever we want to call it. Okay, we have a lot of names for it. We're going to come up with a new one, and I promise that's going to happen, so we'll eliminate this confusion. The Korea fund, whatever it is, it doesn't matter.
else fund.
Toy fund.
No wonder he's got 4 garages
But
in
in all
town.
seriousness, guys, we're getting hung up on a lot of this stuff, and I think everyone agrees here that this is,
We all wanna save it, we just don't know where.
exactly.
Yeah.
So, at this point, I have to have a vote on this
Beat
because,
ourselves up for it.
exactly.
Just have a
I would
vote.
be happy, we're plus 6 minutes.
Either way, we can't lose.
Yeah, so I have a motion and a second to increase that contribution to the stabilization fund by $1 million. All those in favor? I gotta hold them up, because I don't have,
Yeah.
oh, I do have unanimous, well, I'm against, so.
You don't get to vote.
I can vote anytime I wanna vote, it's
Chris,
the chairman's
just for
prerogative.
clarification, the motion was to increase by 1 million.
Yeah.
And place that 1 million in the capital account.
That is correct.
Exactly.
Short term.
Yep.
Yeah, Jerry, We have
Sorry.
stabilization, if we call debt, then this becomes capital, we stop getting confused.
It's not cement.
And don't worry, people, you don't have to worry about me at town meeting.
We give it a title and we also give it a number.
Yep,
Right.
seriously, thank
Yeah,
you.
There you go.
Excellent.
Number 2.
All right, guys. So we are good with you guys. Thank you very much. I appreciate all your hard work and, you know, it shows in the numbers.
You guys did great, by the way.
All right, guys, a couple last things. First, Paul has uploaded, actually a really good article. I hope, he had sent it earlier. I don't know if anyone had a chance to read it. But it had to do with the pension liability contribution that we had decided to make that $1 million. And it really had it had a good little snippet there, and I suggest if you haven't read it, it is on the Google Drive, or if you look on Paul's email that he sent to us, if you could read it from there.
Yeah.
Like I said,
a
it
national
wasn't
problem.
long, but it you know, it gave a good description of what exactly we're doing.
Yeah, I did read it, and actually it was very good. I mean, basically, you know, you assume an interest rate or rate of return, you know, when you're projecting down the road. And basically, a lot of these funds over the years have projected or assumed a very high interest rate. So they're projecting an 8% rate when it might be 5 or 4 or 3 or 2. And that's why we have this huge gap from
Absolutely.
5 or 10 years ago. That's
Yeah,
all.
it really was a very common sense approach on looking on why we were doing it, so.
Mr. Chairman, the other thing that we have not taken into account, obviously, at this point in time, but we will when we go through the next budget cycle, is a couple of things are on the ballot to vote for the state. One is charter schools.
That was my next point.
Well,
And it's
didn't
not on
I-
our agenda, so actually I was gonna compliment Mr. Schiavi, who sent me an email actually Sunday night telling me, Chris, if we haven't talked about number 2 on charter schools, can we please talk about it? Unfortunately, town hall was closed on Monday, so I could not get the agenda amended, but I do have to point out, Mr. Schiavi appointed this, and thanks, Mark, for bringing it up as well, is that something I think is very important that all of us, and we can't discuss it tonight because
No,
it
it's not.
isn't on the agenda, but
Open business.
I
can talk
talked to
about-
Jerry.
it's-
Talk about it and just
We
not
can't,
vote
we
on
could talk about it, we can't vote on anything, okay? And what I'm
I don't
trying,
want a recommendation or any of that kind of stuff.
I just want to bring it up,
My phone will be
okay? I
ringing in
got
a
two
few
things
minutes.
to bring up. If the charter school issue passes and 12 new charter schools get put on the docket, we will in fact lose money out of our Chapter 70 funds, okay? We have to, it's a choice out. And we pay choice out, and we're gonna be paying it to a very expensive school. It's almost like a vocational school. We can't, as a district, say, you can go to the charter school and you can't, right? So we're back in that situation, A. So we have to think about that. Now, obviously, it's not gonna impact us next year, but it may impact us the year after that.
No question.
The second thing that's on the ballot this year is legalization of marijuana.
I thought you would bring that up first.
I was gonna bring it up first, but I figured
Trying-
it would
he's
be
trying
too
to-
obvious if
he's
I brought it
he's
up
trying to
first.
keep his image clean.
Right. And what they're saying is they're gonna tax that at a significant rate, higher than the average 6%. Supposedly, that money will trickle down to the cities, towns and cities. Unless the state takes it all and tries to fix their problems. So we need to be cognizant of those two major items that are coming down the pike as we start the budget going forward.
I don't think there's any question.
All I
Mr.
wanted to
Shane
talk
has said
about.
it. He's anti-schools and pro-marijuana, so
That's it.
that's pretty much what I got from that. So.
Got it.
I'm kidding. Mr. Rudden, please do not write that
You
down.
can write it.
It's already gone to press.
Seriously, that's
Well, I'm
already
good with
online.
charter schools if we can tell people who to
The
go to,
instant
like the
update.
ELL.
So, but no, Mark, very good points, actually. I wasn't gonna bring up the marijuana one, but,
It'll be significant money.
oh, I don't think there's any question whatsoever that it would be significant money.
For education purposes.
Yeah, exactly.
But
Yeah.
I mean, for against smoking marijuana. Isn't that what it's?
Well, it's
No,
general.
no,
Trust me,
everybody's
they'll
coming
find a
out
way
in
to-
favor of
They'll get
this.
it out of there.
This is a
But,
good
and
deal.
especially Mike's point on
How
charter
many
schools, I think is a significant,
times
a significant question, especially for school funding around
That's my
the
problem.
state. Not necessarily now, but in the future. Last thing I want to do, I want to thank Mr. Correa. Once again, that report is a monster, okay? And I appreciate you taking that on. It's a lot of work, and I nominate you for doing the next one, because this one was so good.
All in favor? We could
But,
vote on that.
No, in all seriousness, that's a lot of work to put that together. I think it's one of the best tools that we provide to the town meeting members, as well as any of the residents of Milford, to be able to look at the articles, not understand the legalese, but to have a nice compact description of what the article is, what our stance is on it. And I think it's invaluable. And once again, thanks so much, Albert. I appreciate it.
Weeks before the town meeting.
Weeks before the town meeting, as we promised. Does anybody have anything else? I appreciate everybody coming out. I know we didn't have a lot to talk about tonight, but we had to have the meeting because we had things tabled for this time, so.
Move to adjourn, Mr. Chairman.
Second,
Do I have a
Before we
second?
adjourn,
Jerry?
Second.
All right,
already seconded.
it's already done. All in favor?
Perfect.
Thank you, guys, and have a good night.
You do.